Well, it was on the evening of Sunday, July 11th, 1886, where at the Metropolitan Tabernacle, C.H. Spurgeon delivered the sermon entitled An Awful Contrast. The sermon was taken from the text of Matthew chapter 26 and verse 67, where it says, "Then they spit in his face," his meaning Jesus, "and struck him, and some slapped him." By way of introduction, I want to begin with these introductory words from Spurgeon. "Let us go in thought to the palace of Cephas the high priest, and there let us in deepest sorrow realize the meaning of these terrible words. Then did they spit in his face. There is more of deep and awful thunder in them than in the bolt that bursts overhead. There is more of vivid terror in them than in the sharpest lightning flash. Then did they spit in his face." Jesus had just been betrayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he was arrested and then brought before the high priest Cephas and his elders. And Jesus is asked this question by Cephas: "Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus' response is this: "Hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of God and coming in the clouds of heaven." Jesus is stating, yes, I am God. Spurgeon continues, "It was in contempt of this claim, in derision of this honor, which he foretold for himself, that then did they spit in his face, as if they could bear it no longer, that he who stood to be judged of them should claim to be their judge, that he whom they had brought at dead of night from the Garden of Gethsemane as their captive should talk of coming in clouds of heaven. It's because of this that they spit in the face of Jesus." The first thing this spitting shows us is how far sin will go. In order to uncover the proof of the total depravity of every single human being, we do not need to look to the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, nor to the blood that has been shed as a result of men such as Herod or the likes of, we would think maybe Hitler. Rather, Spurgeon continues, "The clearest proof that man is totally depraved and that the natural heart of every man stands in direct opposition to God is seen in the fact that they spit in Christ's face." But why? What evil had Jesus done? He came to the earth and he fed the hungry, and he healed the sick, taught with authority. Spurgeon continues, what was there in his whole life that should give them occasion to spit in his face? Even at that moment, did his face flash with indignation against them? Did he look with contempt upon them? No. Not Jesus. Even in that moment, as they spit in his face, he was gentle. He was tender toward his enemies. The second thing this spitting shows us is the shame the Lord of glory suffered when they spit in his face. The shame that Christ must have suffered as a result of being spit upon is a shame no man could ever understand, because he was spit upon for us, for our sin. If we could ever understand the depth of this shame due in part to our sin, we would do nothing but tremble, for we could not bear it. Yet in spite of an unbearable shame, Spurgeon continues, I think of the tender omnipotence of his love. How could he bear this spitting when with one glance of his eye, had he been but angry, the flame might have slain them and withered them all up? Justice should have been served, right? Yet he stood still, even when they spit him, and endured the shame that was ours. The third thing this spitting teaches us is that each of us has spit in the face of Christ. You may respond, I wasn't there. I wasn't there among Cephas and the elders spitting in Christ's face. And yes, you are correct. But the reality is, when we prefer any sin over Christ, we are spitting in his face, not with our mouths, but with our hearts. Spurgeon continues, the mere act of spitting from the mouth seems little compared with this sin of spitting with the very heart and soul and pouring contempt upon Christ by choosing some sin in preference to him. So if you deny that Jesus Christ is God, you spit in his face. If you prefer the things of this world over the things of God, over Jesus Christ, you spit in his face. If you diminish the very message of Jesus, that he came into the world and died as our substitute in our place for our sin, you spit in his face. If you prefer your good works to his and believe that your good works will save you and that you do not need his righteousness, you spit in his face. Spurgeon then concludes with somewhat of a word of encouragement. He says, but if for Christ's sake we are despised, but if for Christ's sake we bear scorn and contempt for him, let us say to ourselves, then did they spit in his face, what then if they also spit in mine? I will welcome the shame. I will count it an honor to be a partaker of the same shame which Christ received on my behalf, in order that he may be lifted up and I may be brought down. I will close with these words. For everyone who has been redeemed with his precious blood ought to count it an honor to be a partaker of the shame, if by any means we may screen Jesus from being further despised and rejected by men.